The world turns, and with each turn, a change. And each change makes it more complex, unpredictable, enigmatic. The world keeps turning. And from the Pellicer and Heredia practice, we anticipate everything that is going to happen. Brexit, artificial intelligence, new commercial borders, legal tech. The world keeps turning, and it commands the reliance on international lawyers who are capable of interpreting this new reality with integrity, honesty, and transparency, offering answers to so many new questions. Whatever it is, ask us. At Pellicer and Heredia, we know how.
Hello, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today on buying a property in Spain in a safe way. I'll be grateful if you could send us through the chat all your questions and tell us where are you contacting us from, so we could be very close to your position. Okay, so understand where you're coming from. I'm going to introduce you now. On one side, I've got Michael Davies from Almeria. Hello, Michael. Can you hear me?
Hello, Ignacio. Hello, everyone.
Thank you for joining, Michael. I know you're a very busy man, and you're taking the time to give today a little bit of advice. I have on the other side Pedro Heredia, and but he's just about coming over, and he says he's just about to join us now because he was in the middle of a traffic jam. Okay, we're going to talk about buying a property in Spain in a safe way. Right, let's start from the very beginning. There are different types of situations that you're going to find here today. One, buying a property as second-hand. Okay, that is being already transferred several times. Then the second is buying a property in a safe way, off plan. Okay, and the third option I will tell you today is buying a property through an auction procedure. We're going to talk, Michael is going to talk now about his experience about buying a property in Spain in a safe way, and we will move on from the three different scenarios. Michael, would you like to start with your advice on a resale property or an off-plan, and then we just jump and start with the questions and answers? Yep.
Of course. Can you hear me well? I'm in the office in Almeria today. I've never done a webinar in this office. It's not.
It's a bit far, Michael. It's a bit far, but probably if you, I don't know if you could be closer and turn on the volume. I don't know if that will help.
Okay, let's have a go. Can you hear me now? A little bit better, perhaps?
Yeah, yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, okay.
It's echoes, yeah, it's
very,
saying.
Very large this speech room. Okay, so, well, thank you for inviting me. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Michael Davies. I'm a Spanish lawyer. I operate in the Andalucía area, and our firm is called Davies, Abogados, Solicitors, and Barristers. So regarding the purchase, how long have I got to explain it, Ignacio?
I think, Michael, if we could keep it simple, like buying a property in the three ways, and then we start with questions and answers, because, I mean, we could be talking forever, but if you want to just do as simple as possible, okay, and then we can move on, because otherwise we only have 1 hour. So, okay, over to you, Michael.
Okay, so for clients that are looking out for properties in Spain, the actual process, we're going to talk about second-hand property purchase first. The actual purchase process is actually the same whether you're buying in Andalucía area where we operate, or up in the Valencia region where Ignacio operates. The expenses are slightly different because of a difference in the transfer tax, which I'll explain later. So the procedure would look something like this. The first thing is you find a property you like, or even beforehand, if you can, line up a Spanish lawyer that can help you once you find the property that you like. In any case, once you've found the property that you like, the estate agent is going to be after you because they'll want you to put down a 3,000 reservation to hold the property, put it off the market while the lawyers look into the paperwork. If you can avoid handing over the €3,000 reservation and hold off until you speak to the lawyer, all the better. But sometimes it's like a necessary evil. So they just won't take the property off the market, and you feel pressured, and you can't get an appointment with a lawyer quick enough, and you sort of end up paying €3,000 down. In any case, you'll meet up with a lawyer. This would give room for a whole new webinar, how to choose an independent lawyer to handle the purchase. This is a very important step. Not all lawyers are born equal. There is plenty of choice. But you want to find a good lawyer that can help you with your purchase, help you with your Spanish wills, help you open the bank account, N.I.E. numbers, powers of attorney. Make sure they've got someone in the office that can deal with all the, put in your name all the services, that's electricity, water, rates, rubbish, community of owners, and they can also line up with your future possible legal needs, mainly inheritance, wills, tax advice, and possibly immigration matters as well, especially since Brexit, that's become more of an important issue. So going back to the main topic of the purchase, so basically your lawyer will give you a budget in writing of all the taxes and fees to expect. At that point, he will organise a power of attorney that you will sign in his favour to handle purchasing, N.I.E. number, bank account, everything that's needed in Spain. That power of attorney can be signed at a local notary in Spain if you're still in Spain when your offer is accepted, or the solicitor in Spain. We can send you a dual column document for you to sign in the UK and have it sent back to us. It's cheaper if you can do it in Spain before you go. I presume you do the same, don't you, Ignacio, up in the Valencia region? If possible, you sign the power of attorney while they're in Spain, and sometimes if it's not the case, then we do.
I should interrupt you here for a minute, Michael, just to mention here the power of attorney. It is crucial in a lot of things, because obviously if you're going back and forth, this is important. But we have experimented, Michael, with regards to N.I.E. numbers. They do give us a lot of problems. Power of attorney from a different country, which is not signed in front of a public notary in Spain or in the consulate. Okay, so now don't ask me why the police station in this area, I don't know if it did go already to Almeria.
That problem that I've heard about is actually specific to your area up there. Down in Almeria, we're not having in Almeria or in the Marbella area, we're not having problem with our normal dual column powers of attorney, signed in front of an English notary, and with the Hague apostille affixed. But yeah, I know you are having some problems up there. And normally they've probably got a chief of police there. That's just a difficult man, and eventually it will probably all go back to normal again. Over the years, we all know that sometimes you do sort of get that sort of situation. I mean, I think I'd probably recommend that you put a complaint in via your local society, and they can normally talk to them and work it all out. Okay, so but good point of advice, because obviously we have what we have, and if that's the situation there at the moment, then if you can sign it at the Spanish notary or at the consulate, all the better. Okay, so basically that power of attorney will be put in place, and then your lawyer will basically be requesting all the normal documentation from the seller's lawyer. He'll go through it all. He'll do all the main searches, and with that, you'll move towards the 10% deposit contract, which is always prepared by the buyer's lawyer. So if you're buying, it will be your lawyer that will prepare the contract, and he will send it to the other lawyer for his approval. So basically, 10% deposit minus €3,000 that you've already paid. That doesn't necessarily have to come via your Spanish bank account. You can send it directly from your Spanish bank account, either to your Spanish lawyer or to the seller's lawyer. There are different ways to do that, but you don't need to get that money over to the Spanish bank account. So if by the time the deposit contract is signed, don't get stressed out if your lawyer has not been able to open up your Spanish bank account yet, because it's not necessary for the deposit. It will be necessary for the completion. So before we move any further forward, let me talk about something that's very important. That is the taxes and fees to expect when you buy a property in Spain. In the Andalusia region, where transfer tax is 7%, I always say that on a property of €200,000, it will all come to about 10%, roughly. If it's a higher price property, the percentage can be slightly lower, and a lower price property, it can be slightly higher. Why? Simply because even though transfer tax is always fixed at 7%, lawyers' fees tend to be 1% plus VAT, but with a minimum fee. The notary fee and registrar's fee also have certain minimum fees, which basically make the smaller properties percentage-wise a bit more expensive and the higher properties cheaper.
Michael,
that's basically
just to compare with different regions, so people know how much would be here. Spike is saying here how much would it cost here. Well, then we are talking on transfer tax 10% at the moment, and I normally ask people to budget 13% average. Okay, that will cover the 10% transfer tax, notary fee, register fee, and solicitors fees, which in this case, Spike, we are charging an average of 1% plus VAT. There is always a minimum when they are very cheap, or depending on the work, whether they're difficult conveyancing or through the auctions or through different situations. And depending on the volume of the amount of money that you spend, it could be as well adjusted. Okay, so I just wanted to clear this up. Yeah, Michael.
Yeah. Okay. So that's absolutely, well. Basically, we sort of budget in exactly the same way. So the only difference basically is that you've got your transfer tax is 10%, ours is 7%. So I'm talking about 10%, you're talking about 13%. It makes absolute sense. It's all sort of lined up. I think we also charge quite similar amounts. Like you, we have and most lawyers, we have a minimum fee for properties under a certain amount, and also on very expensive properties, obviously there are certain negotiation can happen. With the prices. If people are buying a big mansion in Marbella and they're paying €4 million, well, you don't charge 1%. That's an extreme example. The average price of the properties that we handle conveyancing for down in this area is about 300,000, around that sort of figure. Okay, so basically, we always recommend. I mean, my expertise is probate, and I cannot stress how important it is that at the moment of buying your property, make sure you sign a Spanish will. Use the lawyer that's handling the conveyance to do it for you, or call somebody like us and we'll prepare it. But make sure it's done as soon as possible after you purchase the properties. People get themselves into a lot of trouble simply because they don't make a Spanish will when they buy their property in Spain. So then when you sign the deposit contract, we normally set a completion period of anywhere between 1 month and 4 months for the actual completion at the notary. So before the completion at the notary happens, your lawyer will have organised power of attorney, your N.I.E. number. He'll have opened up your bank account. Now, because the money for the main completion would normally be transferred from you in the UK, Australia, Canada, wherever you are, to your Spanish bank account. On the day of completion, your lawyer, using the power of attorney, will draw a banker's draft in the name of the seller or the seller's lawyer to actually complete at the notary. In Spain, when you complete at the notary, you receive the keys, you make the payment, and it's a done deal. It's absolutely foul-proof if the system is used correctly. Your lawyer will order a last-minute search to happen at the notary just before the signing to make sure that nothing has changed since he did his initial searches on the property. If the seller had a mortgage, that's cancelled the same day, and you'll see that your lawyer will organise one draft for the redemption figure and one draft for the equity. Obviously, the buying process there's a lot of steps, a lot of things that happen in the background that you don't actually see happen. So this is why I shall say one of the most important things is to make sure that you choose a good lawyer. I know Ignacio and Pedro have done webinars before on different methods to choose a good lawyer, and I agree with all the things that they've said on those webinars. Basically, number one, because I say the same thing, don't simply go to the lawyer recommended by the estate agent. Doesn't mean he's going to be a bad lawyer. It doesn't guarantee he's going to be a good lawyer, because he doesn't guarantee independence, which is just as important as him being technically sound. So good ways to choose a lawyer. Well, I always say, ask around in the area where you're going to purchase, ask other English people, and you'll probably start seeing the odd name that keeps cropping up. Well, that's a good indicator. Have a look at the British Consular website. It has a list of recommended lawyers all along the coast. There's a big disclaimer on the list that says that it's not their recommendation, but the truth of the matter is that they're all the lawyers that are on the list. I'm on the list, for example, here in Andalusia. We're all lawyers that have been around for a long time, and sort of we all know each other. So that will be a good place to get advice. Also, nowadays with internet, Zoom, etc., there's no excuse for not sort of having a chat with a couple of lawyers that you've shortlisted and just see how how, what sort of feeling that you get, or go and see them in their office, make sure they're not working from a basement somewhere. I think that's the basic. Just be sensible about it. But the main thing about lawyers is make sure that you do dedicate a certain amount of time to the finding of the good lawyer, because it is going to be an important that's an important part of the purchasing process. So if instead of buying a second-hand property, you buy a new property but it's already completed, well, then everything is the same, except for, instead of paying transfer tax in Andalusia, which is 7%, instead you pay VAT, which is 10%, and an additional 1.2% document tax. In the Valencia region,
it's very similar, Michael.
You want to quickly go through what is in the Valencia region, which is quite similar, and there's not as
it's quite similar. We're talking about 10% VAT, Michael, and then we have 1.5% stamp duty tax, except if it's your main property. If it's going to be for your main property, and you could ask for a reduction of 0.10%. Okay, so it will be 0.10% instead of 1.5%. Okay, it's like an allowance they give you when it's going to be for your permanent house. Okay, so that's where we are at the moment. We've got Pedro here. I don't know if Pedro wants to add something else. Pedro did join us.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I apologize for being a little bit late. I got a traffic jam and I was on the limit on time, so this is why I got 15-20 minutes late. So yeah, but
Pedro, we informed that you were running late, but it's good. It's good. Michael started already with buying a property in Spain, a second hand, and we're just jumping now into an off-plan property. Michael, will you like to carry on a little bit more on the off-plan property? Because some of them, I'm sure they want to plan on that.
Just to finalize with the new property that is finalized. So in Andalusia, basically buying a new property is 4.2% more expensive than buying a second-hand property. We're talking about transfer tax 7% or VAT plus document tax that together add up to 4.2%. And also to point out that the difference in taxes on new properties between the Valencia region and the Andalusia region is almost nothing. It's just that 0.3% difference on the document tax. Also, just quickly to point out, because we still get lots of people that are asking about this, that yes, the Valencia region has now basically equaled the Andalusia region for inheritance tax, and both regions have very excellent conditions for inheritance tax when it's the spouse or descendants that inherit. Basically, up to €1 million, you don't pay anything in Andalusia, and after that, you get 99% deduction. In the Valencia region, you get a 99% deduction. In other words, basically, as long as your beneficiaries are spouse or descendants, you don't really have to worry about inheritance tax in these two regions, which is an advantage for these two regions versus some other regions of Spain, which are still much more expensive for inheritance tax. And this you need to take into account when you're choosing where to buy. So,
Michael, could I ask you, stop you for a minute, and just because I know you've got probably a lot of experience on due diligence, and I think a lot of people. Can you give us just 1 minute or 2 minutes of kind of due diligence that you found, probably like problems with the sea, with the lady costas, problems with the inland, not the AFO? Just, I know it's very difficult to put them all together, but I think it's good. It's good because it gives a lot of information. And just few that you think you should recall here.
Okay, so the first thing is that people don't quite realize is inland properties in general are more complex to convey than properties down on the coast and the more urban areas, because there are more things that can go wrong. Some lawyers don't actually handle conveyancing inland. We handle very little. We do sometimes handle them, but not very often, because they are more problematic. There are more checks that need to be done. That we find many more urbanistic issues, urbanistic problems with inland properties, more illegal extensions because they're not as controlled. There are more issues. The other properties that are complex in Spain are properties that are right on the beachfront because of the ley de costas that you've mentioned, and they again need extra caution and probably deserve extra fees, especially if they're lowly properties right on the beachfront, because you need to do some extra extra checks. As far as normal due diligence, the most important place where the solicitor will go in the first instance is to the land registry to make sure the property belongs to the seller, that there are no charges on it. It's also important to check that urbanistically there are no issues with the property, that there are no illegal extensions. Well, there are quite a lot of checks, and it's again, you can do another webinar on going through all the different checks that take place. But again, it boils down to being cautious when you choose the lawyer and making sure that he's 100% independent. An agent can recommend a lawyer to you, and that lawyer can be 100% independent. But unless you're getting the recommendation from somewhere else at the same time, it's just not a good way of recommending, even though, in my case, lots of agents recommend me, and that's great, and I like it. But if it was my mother buying in Germany, and the agent says, use this lawyer, and she doesn't ask anybody else, that's just not a right way to, because you don't know that agent, you don't know that solicitor, so it's just not a good way to choose the solicitor. Ignacio, I'll have to leave the buying at auction and things to you. You're an expert.
Okay. Right. Okay.
Very much like to hear how you're going to explain that.
Right. I don't know if Pedro wants to add something. Pedro, do you want to add something about the due diligence that you normally do, or buying a property or planned property before we jump into the other one? I don't think you have the microphone on, Pedro. We cannot hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
Just to talk about, obviously we have had many experiences on clients, on real estate agents that recommend, and so obviously we work in an independent way. Cannot be in a different way. A lawyer should be doing that way, independent. If we have done it sometimes to recommend a client not to buy, we will recommend it. If we need to, because at the end we see some issues regarding planning law, or some issues about some difficulties on knowing which is situations about the property, about the debts, about the whatever. It's something that it's important to choose someone who at the end is going to tell you exactly, because you at the end you instruct a lawyer just to buy in a safest way, buy 100% sure. Without that, you will not instruct a lawyer to do it. So this is what we do. We are recommended by many real estates, by clients, by someone who knows us, even though we are absolutely independent on recommending clients, and obviously it's an investment, and sometimes it's a small apartment, but sometimes it's a bigger house. Whatever it is, it's for us and for the client, it is an important investment, and obviously we need to treat it as perfectly. The property registry, cadastral, descriptions, ownership, debts, planning law. Everything needs to be checked perfectly in order to secure the purchase. When this is what we normally recommend to be done and to be clarified to the client, is always before the 10% payment. We like to describe everything as it is before the 10% payment, because 10% is just a high amount. When someone decides to buy a property and says, okay, well, I have seen a property that I'm in love with, I would like to buy it, then obviously, yes, I tell them normally, just go ahead, pay the deposit, 2,000, 3,000 euros, whatever is asked, and then let's make it a due diligence. Or sometimes, obviously, we say, well, send me the document that has been sent to you by the agent in order to take it rapidly. And normally these documents are standard. Normally it says it's just a deposit to put the property out of a property and give some time to prepare the private contract and make the due diligence for the buyer. Sometimes the seller has an inheritance, sometimes he's divorcing, sometimes something has not been duly described, something has not been duly inscribed in the property registry. Whatever it is, will be done and will be in the due diligence, will be checked and will be included in the contract, whatever the parties agree or whatever is spoken by parties between the agent. And Ignacio, I'm seeing many questions right now. Let's whatever you decide.
Okay. go. Yeah, Michael
Ignacio,
wants to just
yeah,
add something. Yeah.
One very important thing, as I say, even though the due diligence thing is something that we could talk about a lot, one very, very important thing I always think is if you're buying under construction, make sure that your lawyer always asks for the bank guarantees each time you make a stage payment. That's a very important thing. We've both lived through the credit crunch in 2008, and obviously what saved our clients in that case is that every single one had every single payment towards the purchase price that all our clients had made all had the bank guarantees in place. So when the builder went bust, we just claim back all the money on all those stage payments, and that was the end of it. If you haven't got a bank guarantee, that's basically you can lose your money. And people don't realize this, but they are entitled by law to request the bank guarantees, but they must physically get hold of them after each payment.
Yeah, I would like to add as well with regards to buying a property off plan or even resale. That when they do the €3,000 deposit, if you're pushed to put the €3,000 to the reservation, make sure they're subject to legalities. Because at the end of the day, you're happy to do the first deposit, the €3,000, but if there is any issue, then it could be refunded. Okay, it will be returned. Okay, that's one thing. Now the 10%, as Michael stated, the reservation contract, it will basically, if it's drawn up by a lawyer, well, obviously I know Michael does, and Pedro and ourselves, we really put strong clauses there that really protects that everything is going through properly. If something is wrong, then there is a way of returning the money. Okay, for example, you will always, some people are asking here, Michael, about the inland. What is inland? Well, inland, when we refer to inland, is properties that there are not urban land, they are not in the city probably, they're not, the urbanistic is different. And a lot of people have been buying 10,000 square meters of land, probably they never applied for a license, they did extensions with no license, etc., etc., etc. So we need to be very careful whether there is any infraction, any action from the town hall against the property. And all these, as you guys said, we need to be very careful. I mean, buying a property in Spain is safe as long as you do the due diligence correctly and you have a good lawyer. You shouldn't have a problem. But it is important that, especially in the inland area, to look everything in detail. Now, I've got another question here as well that they were saying. Is it possible to have a surveyor, or recommended to have a surveyor before completion? Well, especially on the rustic areas, yes. I mean, if you're buying in a condominium in a building, probably the surveyor is going to bring very little value. It's good to have it, probably. And I always ask clients to confirm what type of report they want, because if you are having a mortgage, you're going to have a valuation just for mortgage purposes. But if you are having complex or you're spending a lot of money, I definitely will go for a surveyor specific that they're very well used to, not only doing valuations, doing the due diligence with lawyers, and have a lot of experience, if possible, going through the courts and problems. Because this is the good people to have to hire. Yeah, we're getting more and more questions here. But let me just ask you before we start into questions and answer, just to mention a little bit about buying through an auction. Some of you will love to buy a property and there is an auction, and then you will tell your lawyer that you want to bid in that property. But some of you might be investors and might want to buy properties through the auction. I will put you here a free link where is in Spain, where you could see on a daily basis the auction properties, and you could start bidding for them. Okay, that's like every citizen could start bidding, and then you need to deposit at 5% of the valuation given by the court, and that money is given back to you if you finally don't get the property. The beauty of this going on this is if you know the area, the property, then you can start through your lawyer, because it's not compulsory to have a lawyer, but I highly recommend you to have one, because he will be the one who starts doing the due diligence based on the paperwork that the court or this portal is providing. So basically, is buying a property through an auction, bidding in front of everybody. Everybody is competing to each other, and even the creditor entitled to bid as well. Okay, now this is one way. The other option you have is as well for investors to buy credits. Okay, this is another option. You buy a credit from a creditor, and then you take over the existing procedure, and then obviously you put into auction, and then if nobody pays the money that they owe you, you repossess the property. If there is somebody living in the property, you could evict them. If there is nobody, then you just take, because the judge will give you the title, you pay the 10% transfer tax here in this area, and then you put it in your name in the land registry. So you don't need to go to the notary. It goes from the judge straight away, go to the land registry after you pay the tax. Okay. Now, as I said, two types of issues here. If you just want to bid, okay, I'll give you the link here, and you're free to bid. And whenever you fall in love with a property and you know the area and everything, your lawyer will do the due diligence for you, and you can start doing. If you are able to, if you have, like as I said, a credit, then you take over an existing procedure. Okay. Now the timing for the courts is very different, so it's not the same in one time or the other. So let's say if the ones I'm going to share with you here is about the auction, and you could look into it. You could click Almeria, you could click Alicante. It's all throughout Spain. And then you pick the one, and then you've got a date for you to start bidding. Okay, I know probably that's more for investors than for somebody who really wants to move into a property, because sometimes finding the right property, the right price, and the right area, and the right time is pretty much impossible, because it's a dream. But probably like a second-hand property, it could be a good option. And definitely, I will recommend you to use lawyers for that. I mean, more than ever, because it's not an easy, it's not straightforward, but it's a very good way of buying cheap. It's the cheapest way, probably, because you could even get it 50% of the valuation that is being given by the court. Okay. Right. Since we already have a lot of questions, I don't know if Michael and Pedro wants to start with, and they've been picking their questions.
Yeah.
And then, okay, Pedro, please go ahead. Yeah.
Well, let's go for, I mean, you can see the first one is regarding capital gains. Someone from New York. Hello, Jean. Selling a property in New York and pay capital gains, then move to Spain, become a tax resident, and will I be double taxed on the sale of New York City house? If you sell the property in the year, a calendar year, from the 1st of January to 31st of December, for example, you sell a property in January, February, and then you become a resident that year, and you spend more than 183 days that year, then you will be tax resident. Even though you sold the property before you start being a tax resident, you have to report capital gains tax in Spain. So, and you will be paying capital gains tax in Spain about the property in New York, and deduct whatever you paid. But if it's your main property, if it is your main residence in New York, you have been living there at least 3 years, and then you reinvest in Spain, that will be deducted on the reimbursement. But this is in case that you become tax resident the same year you sell the property. But if you sell the property, for example, now during this year, and then you become tax resident this year, but you spend less than 183 days this year, so you will not be tax resident in Spain, even though you became tax resident in Spain, and you will not have to report capital gains tax in Spain. I know it's a little bit confused, but it's if you become tax resident, then you need to report. If you sold the property the same year, okay? And you could be able to reinvest that money in a property which will become your main residence, and you have 2 years from the selling of a property in New York. But if you do not become tax resident because you did not spend more than 183 days, then nothing needs to be reported.
It's very good. It's very good.
Okay.
Like that, Petra.
Second question by Susan. Thank you, Susan. Please, can you confirm you should have a home inspection whereby the property to find issues with all the property. This is to find 35 home inspector organization to approach, houses can be made to look beautiful. Yeah, I mean, and this is something that happens. I have added one of the articles obviously a surveyor, I mean, I think it's been explained by Ignacio and Michael, is something that is I think is important. It gives you value to understand what property are you going to buy. Obviously, normally in all houses, that may appear something that you didn't see because you are not an expert, you don't know it. It's hidden. And it's something that we have experience, for example, with termites. I don't know if in English is there that word termites. Obviously didn't know, and then the people realized one was bought, the termites was there. So we have a timing on applying for these hidden issues that happen in a property of 6 months. Once you complete, you are able to apply to the seller to pay you or compensate you about this. And 6 months on resales, and it is really 2 years for new properties. For new properties, there's more time, and it's really 10 years on the structures to apply for. If something is done correctly in the structure of the property or the pillars, then it's 3 years of the issues about the habitation of the property, and then it's 1 year for the aesthetics of the property. Okay, but in this case, about this kind of hidden, like humidity, like the termites, for example, this is an example of things about the plumbing or things that you cannot see on the property, on some cracks on the property. Those things you have a timing on 2 years on new properties and 1 year and 6 months on resale. So if you find a surveyor, and this is something that we do, when it's the properties and no properties, we recommend to send a surveyor, which is an architect in Spain, to make a basic visit at the first time, or maybe make a report in case it's something peculiar, something which is big. But it is, in my opinion, it's always value. You will always add to know exactly about the situation on the property, and it obviously has a cost, but it's what gives you is more than what it costs you. It may cost you because it's going to give you really a situation about the edification of the property, and it's important to know it.
Yeah, I just like to point out that with the survey, I always think there's another secondary advantage, and that is that I imagine that you guys, like us, when the survey's been hired, we always send him an email search certificate so they can see the measurement of the house. And we always ask them just to point out if there's anything that doesn't add up, because many title deeds in Spain, instead of describing the property room by room, they give totals of square meterage. And so very often, the only way we can find out if there is an illegal extension is to use the surveyor. In other words, the surveyor goes round there with the search certificate that says total square meterage constructed, 170 square meters. When he goes round there, nowadays they have a little laser beam that just goes round all the rooms, and they can find out exactly what the total construction measures. And with that, they can tell us, and then we may find suddenly that there's an extra room that isn't allowed for in the title deed. In other words, we've got a title deed that says the construction is 170 square meters, and the surveyor is telling us that the actual property measures 195. Well, what does that tell us? It tells us that there's an illegal extension that has never been added to the title deed, and that's very important, because often by simply knowing the total square meterage of a house, the client can't work out whether the 170, this is the title deed, is in reality what he's actually seeing. This isn't obviously as important if you've got an apartment block where all the flats look exactly the same, and it's easy to detect an illegal extension. That when you're talking about houses, they're all different along the street, and you're looking at this house, it all looks as if it's been built at the same time, but there may be an illegal extension there suddenly that unless you legalize it, when you go to sell, it may be detected, and it will cause obviously problems if you can't legalize it. Some things can be legalized later on, other things can't be legalized. So if there is an illegal extension, we do need to know about it, and the surveyor is a great instrument for that.
Actually, Michael, it's good you guys mentioned that, because we are handling now a case which is a very good property. And in the old days they built it and they sold it again, and now you are inheriting really at the typical basement that hasn't been legalized, which probably never applied for a license. Which my main concern now is whether there is any action against the extension. And the typical thing, Michael, you've seen probably the pool hasn't been registered, extension on the basement, and even happen in the urban areas where there is a plot of land. But I think surveyors could be very important, very good, as you guys stated, to make sure where we are, because then one side you have the land registry, on the other side you have the cadastral, which is a tax office, and on the other side you have the reality of it. So you need to match the three of them.
Yeah, and the other thing that I like to ask the surveyor as well, in the rural areas, or not so rural areas, because it's somebody asked, say, what is an inland property? Well, we're basically what I'm referring to is houses that have been built on non-urban land. Okay, it may, to you, you may think it looks quite built up, actually, even because there may be some roads and things, but it's, for us, it's has the complexities of a rustic property. The other thing we like to ask surveyor about is the property connected to the sewage system? Especially in there are some areas here in Almeria, not so much in the Malaga area, and also up in the Valencia region where you work, especially up in Moraira, Javier, Denia, and the sort of everything that's sort of a bit set back from the coast. You do come across quite a lot of properties that are not connected to the mains. They're on cesspits still, and of course, there's nothing essentially. It is wrong, but sometimes it's like a livable. It's like a bearable problem, if you like, but obviously it doesn't need to be disclosed. One needs to know about it. What type of cesspit have they got? Is it one of the illegal ones? Is it one of the legal ones? At least know what the situation is, as much as there are many properties, and that on its own is not maybe sufficient to say no to the conveyance, but we do need to sort of know about it and just be aware of it. And we always, apart from asking the agent and the seller, we always ask the surveyor to check. If they tell us that it is connected to the mains and we've got sort of doubts because of where the property is, we always ask the surveyor to tell us whether it is connected or not.
Michael and Pedro, I don't know if you answered Derek's question, but it's a good point. Is it better to have a lawyer in place before finding a property? I would not want to lose a property while finding a lawyer.
Absolutely. I think the best thing is, we sort of touched on it briefly before, is very often people come over here, they start looking around at properties, they make 2 or 3 offers, they go back to the UK, which is as it should be, so they've got a cooling down period, they go back, and then 3 weeks later they decide, yes, we're going to go for that property or this property. What we suggest is that you have the lawyer all lined up. It also basically will allow you to basically, if you've got an agent that's very mean pushy, I want the €3,000. If you've got a lawyer that you can just simply call and say, look, is this a trustworthy agent or is it a fly-by-night sort of person? And it just gives you that sort of comfort that you can call someone and find something out very quickly. Often what we also do is when people come over and they're looking around at properties, they come in, they all leave the power of attorney in place so that we're ready to go if in the end they find a property that they like. Obviously, it's not something to do if you've only got a 50% chance that you're going to buy something, but if you've got 90% chance that you'll end up buying something, sign a power of attorney. And what we normally do is we just don't charge them for the power of attorney. They pay the notary €90. We leave it in our we leave it in our filing system. If it's ever used, then we charge them. If they don't use it, well, it just stays there forever, and it's just never used because the power of attorney is purely to purchase property in Spain.
That's very good. Okay, we've got a few estate agents here. We have Alex from Imo Investments in La Senia. We've got Oli from Casada. We've got a few here. And one of the guests are asking, is it worth it to use estate agents or should I go direct? Okay, well, it is quite difficult to answer that question because a lot of agents have a lot of properties and they have good relationship with vendors and contacts. So if you really want a property and the agent has it, I think probably he might have the exclusivity or they might not. Okay, I think they always bring value to the equation. Could I do it direct? Yes, the answer is yes. If you're having one lawyer representing the buyer or representing the vendor, or one could represent 2, as long as there is not a conflict of interest, that could happen. If the deal is being done, well, there is no need for a estate agent. It's like a value. If you need a lawyer, you don't need a lawyer, then there is no need of a lawyer. but they bring value to a lot of equations and transactions, and I think it is worth shopping around and seeing who's reputable and who's a good state agent, because they will bring value to the equation. As Michael stated, I think it's important, if you're going to just shop around, to have the lawyer in place, have things in place, and then just make sure that you get the right property for your own purposes. I don't know if Pedro wanted to add anything here as well.
There is something that I always explain to clients that want to buy a property, and they make this question. And obviously, when they buy properties and they look for properties in platforms, or they go in the street and then they just stick with the real estate agents. At the end, in general, the real estate, they have a mandate from the vendor, and the vendor, whenever they sell the property, is the one who pays the fees of this real estate agent. So the buyer will not be paying any fee really to the estate agent. And it gives you a value of a knowledge of a vendor, a knowledge of the situation, a knowledge of a property, and it's going to push obviously to complete the property, is going to, in order to complete the transaction through lawyers, through the agent. It gives you a value, and in general, unless you look for, because it's starting to increase in Spain, the like personal shoppers, that you instruct someone in order to find your property and then you pay a fee of that, and that's all. But at this time, the system in Spain is that the vendor pays the fees of the seller, pays the fees of the agent. So you say, well, I'm going to contact directly the seller. Okay, well, but maybe the seller is going to send you obviously the agent. And in that case, maybe you do not get the information that you may get from the seller, from the agent that wants to sell the property. Obviously, they want to sell the property in the name of a seller, and probably will push and will give you and will give to both parties to the knowledge in order to complete. Obviously, this fee will be paid by the seller. So jumping out the real estate, normally they do not give you any value. Really, it doesn't mean that you're going to get a better price at all. I think it's obviously I think it's important if there is a reputable companies, estate agents. They will work perfectly. They will know what to do. They will give you the information that needs to be done. So I think it's a value. Obviously, this is in general, and as well as lawyer. I mean, it's an obligation to instruct a lawyer. No, it's an obligation to instruct a lawyer before paying a deposit. No, obviously, if we give you value on security, on knowledge, on your situation, your scenario, on buying, on making a transaction, signing a power of attorney or not, about the NIE number at the beginning, and to be able to, well, not pay the total amount of 10%, just pay a deposit, and then let's go through a due diligence. Well, I think it gives real estate agents, lawyers, give value on and give it security really on the transaction.
Mm-hmm. There is a few things here I would like to comment with Alexander. He's saying, so you're not sure about the sale of a property as long as the 10% is not paid. Well, if you have a reservation deposit, it all depends on what the reservation deposit. I don't know if Michael did cover that, but if they did only pay the 3,000 euros, pretty much, that doesn't mean, Michael, that is being sold. It's just probably a reservation. Now, the 10%, when it's paid the 10%, what probably Michael meant is the reservation contract, which is what is the private contract where you are exchanging and you're paying an amount. It's not about the money, it's about the type of contract. If you only have a reservation contract, which is a deposit, then doesn't mean it's being sold.
Yeah.
So they could give you back the 3,000 euros and say, sorry. So that could happen.
It is like, I mean, let's be a little bit with the details. I mean, it's like when you pay a deposit because the agent, in the name of a seller, obviously has spoken with the seller and said, okay, let's agree on that. Let's receive it. I mean, this is how it normally works. It could be some situation which is different. Then you pay some deposit, and then the agent makes the offer to the seller, and then it has to be accepted. But when the deposit is done, and you understand because of the agent there is an acceptance on the price, well, we have parties identified, we have a price, and we have a small deposit. Obviously, it's like a pre-contract, but it's like in order to be extended, obviously, in a private contract with all the details about the transaction. But it's a pre-contract that gives you a right on buying the property and gives you a right to be able to be in a situation on private contract. But obviously, it has many details on this. It has many details on this. But obviously, one of the issues there that happens is that property is out of a market, and there's many conflicts because sometimes there's an agent that is looking put the property in the market, but is contacted by another agent, and they have a collaboration. And sometimes the buyer with the agent, and the standard is buying the property, and maybe the other seller is selling it to another one. Well, those things obviously needs to be checked on the transactions and the deals that they have, the seller, the agent of the buyer sometimes, and the buyer.
Okay, we've got another question here with Norman. He was saying, can you give me an example of the worst problems that you have come across? Well, we could be forever here, Norman, but the bottom line is that means basically that we did recommend the client not to buy the property. And I'm sure Michael came across several times, Pedro as well. Yeah, Pedro, Michael, you wanted to mention something, yeah?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, how is it still possible that we can recommend somebody pays us a retainer, we recommend they don't purchase, they go away upset, and they end up buying the property using somebody else or without any lawyer because their desire to purchase was just so big. In this case, the client said, "Oh, my wife would have killed me if I didn't purchase the property." So they bought the property, and of course, it did have terrible problems, which they later came back with. I don't know if it's ever happened to you, of people have actually gone ahead and bought a property that you've told them not to purchase.
Yeah, that's correct. And a lot of people that didn't buy, they're very grateful, because sometimes you fall into a trap, and then I think, Norman, the worst case that you could say, well, it's not worse, to be honest, but the bottom line is your lawyer says not to buy. I will really follow his advice. That's important because there is hundreds and thousands of properties and it's the buyer's market, and sometimes we fall in love with the property and we really want it and we push it hard enough, and then you end up into a mess, and I don't like even to handle conveyancing with disclaimers that say, I've told you all these, but then here we go. You have a property with a whole bunch of problems. This is not our style.
I think people have to fall in love with their property, but not to a point that makes them, just not listen to anyone around them if there's something
which it
wrong.
happens.
Yes, no, it does happen. You and me we had experience with a property under construction. If you don't remember the old infamous Almanzora Country Club, maybe 6 or 7 times we recommended not to purchase in that complex because there were just things that were just not quite right. It was a building under construction. It didn't offer bank guarantees, and basically people went ahead and bought anywhere because the properties were sort of below market price, and it was a dream, and people went ahead, and we did have clients come back to us after when we started issuing the court cases against builders and we handled the court case against the builder. The cases that clients have actually, we told them not to purchase and they went ahead and bought anyway, and then we ended up having to handle the court case. It can happen, but people also need to know that if the solicitor they choose is truly independent and knows his business, and there are plenty of them along the coast, it's not like in the old days when it was very not that easy to find English speaking, technically sound, independent lawyer, but now there are plenty all along the coast. Visit the British Consular website for a list. If you do things correctly and you do what says, just follow his advice, you can buy property 100% safely in Spain. That is the bottom line. The horror stories that people normally hear is because something has been done wrong along the way. Either the lawyer wasn't independent, the lawyer didn't know what they're doing, they didn't use a lawyer, because normally that's how it works. They didn't use a lawyer. Or in the old days, people that purchased, sometimes even with a lawyer, unfortunately, I have to say, never with us, never with you guys, but we do know people that purchased in the old days and didn't get bank guarantees on their stage payments. That nowadays would be almost impossible, but in the old days it did happen. And of course, we only realized when the credit crunch hit, and it was difficult to believe, in fact, how many people were out there without bank guarantees on their stage payments.
Now, very quickly here, before we even go, there is a question. I mean, even though it's not the immigration firm today, you've got if you go into our website, I did click here for the latest webinars in our webpage. You can watch it back from tomorrow, and you've got many of them. Now, the golden visa, if you're buying a property in Spain over 500,000 euros, and that this is in one person's name, because if you do it joint, then it will not match the 500, it will be 250 and 250. Then could I apply for golden visa is one of the questions. Yes, but what about if I have a mortgage? Then the mortgage needs to be the equity, the minimum equity you need to have in the property free of charge is 500,000 euros. So any extra after 500,000 euros, you could have a mortgage, but minimum 500,000 euros purchase price on a title deed. Okay, so that's important as well. I don't know, Michael, Pedro, I don't know if we did cover most of the questions here. Yep, I don't know if so it's important. Alexander says to pay the 3,000 and the 10. Well, it depends. You know, what Michael was trying to say here, to secure the property properly, but it's catch-22 here, because first you do the reservation to put it off the market, but I know there is no security. Now, to have security, you need to have a contract, but sometimes the lawyer needs time, and I'm of the opinion not to spend much more money unless doing the minimum due diligence, because otherwise you don't need to go, you really don't want to go back after your money. You know, you really need to make sure that your money is well spent and the transaction is going to go ahead. So I'm of the opinion to pay little if possible, but when you are certain through lawyers, then pay the 10%. But I agree that is the buyer's market, and sometimes you lose the property of your dreams, and you know, so it's a bit of making a little bit of moves that are difficult, whether you pay, whether you don't pay. But I'm always of the opinion, if that property is meant to be yours, it will be yours. Okay, so I prefer not to panic rather than just spending the money and then you having an issue going after it. You know, so we need to be cautious, we need to be secure, and we need to do the due diligence. And if you manage that you didn't make it because somebody else took it, oh well, that's it. You could go for somewhere else. You know, there are hundreds and hundreds of property. That will be my personal opinion, you know, rather than you going too fast, spending the money, then finding an infraction or something that really ruins the whole transaction and claiming the money back, it will be a nightmare, and you probably are not interested on that. Okay. Pedro, yeah, I think we've got Ivan here as well saying, peace of mind ensures.
But
Yeah.
I don't know if we have time. I mean, obviously about the power of attorney, something that we haven't spoken about. Is something important. Obviously, saying about should I revoke it, should I cancel it once the purchase is done. I mean, lawyers or whoever is authorized on the power of attorney shouldn't use it without your instructions, obviously. But obviously, if you think everything is done, is finished, well, we have hundreds of clients that has not revoked it, and obviously we will not do anything without any instruction. But this, if you think that you're gonna change lawyer, you're gonna obviously nothing is gonna be done or used. Well, why not? Obviously, it has a cost, a minimum cost, but is not relevant.
Okay, for those who didn't have access to the panel with the chat because you're at home and you know, you're watching back and you cannot, the links that we mentioned here, most of them are in our website. The only one, Michael Davies' website, our website, and then you have subastas.boy.es for those who are investors and you're a bit curious about how the auction procedure works, whether the area where you live, you need to put an alert, and whether you're ready for action. Okay. Well, Michael, thank you very much for your time from Almeria office. Pedro, thank you very much as well. I know you're running late for your further appointment. Juanfran is going to play now a video. Just make sure if you have questions, send them an email to Michael, which you've got on the screen, Pedro as well, or myself. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
To Juanfran. See you. Bye-bye.
Buying a property in Spain. There are many reasons to purchase a property in Spain. The climate, the food, the culture, or simply to enjoy life. If you already see yourself buying the house of your dreams in the Mediterranean, it is important to be cautious and follow a series of steps. First, prepare a budget and take into account all the possible expenses. Remember to add transfer tax or VAT to the sale price, as well as legal fees, notary fees, and land registry fees. And even if it was love at first sight, do not rush or sign anything. The most important thing, especially if you're not yet a Spanish resident, is to hire an independent lawyer, a specialist who speaks your language and solely defends your interests. Together, you can review the characteristics of the house, should it have pending charges, negotiate a mortgage with the banks, and you will always be up to date throughout the whole process. But most importantly, fall in love with your property and do things by the book. Your new life starts there. Pellicer and Heredia, international lawyers.